Shalom, brethren. I want to thank God for His faithfulness and for His very presence in our lives individually and corporately. Today, by the grace of God, I would like us to look into or start looking into a serial on eschatology. We want to take it serially. That is Matthew 24. The discourse that Jesus gave to his apostles. We see first in Matthew 24. We will take it verse by verse, hopefully. And sometimes we'll combine two verses together. And as the Lord would have it, I would want us to really have our Bibles with us as we go through this deep study. I call it a deep study because we're going to take it verse by verse, and it is something that is going to run serially. Matthew 24. I read, and it says, verse 1. It says, "And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple." You know, after they left the temple, coming out of it, alright, that's in Matthew 23, where Jesus told them, "Look, I leave your house unto you desolate." They followed Jesus, and when they followed Jesus out, that's the disciples, they followed Jesus out, and they began to say to him, look at the temple, look at the beauty of it, look at the exquisiteness of this whole thing. In other words, the disciples were thrilled with the physical worth and the beauty of the temple. They were awed at the size and the beauty of it all. That God dwells in this place. It's a beautiful house. It is befitting for God. Just as today, a lot of people beat their chest at the churches, their church, or where they worship. However, we want to look at something deeply, truly. Is it really where we worship that matters? What is the temple of God? Because these people were happy, they were thrilled, they were excited. Because in the whole of Palestine, there was no building like that. As a matter of fact, I think it was in Brazil or so, or in Mexico, I can't remember exactly, that they tried to, that's in recent times, they tried to recreate a temple like that. So as at that time in Palestine, there was no other building that could compare. It was the pride of the Israelites. It was the pride of the Jewish man. The building, the temple. This is God's house. However, let's hear what God himself would have to say to them. There was something that God said in Isaiah 66. Let us quickly look at it. Verses 1 and 2. "Thus saith the Lord,
The heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye build unto me? And where is the place of my rest? For all those things hath mine hand made, and all those things have been, saith the Lord. But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembleth at my word."
Now, that was God himself. He was asking the people, just as he could have asked them on the day the disciples were excited with Jesus concerning the building. God asked the people, "Excuse me, where is the house you said you have built for me? Where is the house you claim to have built for me? As a matter of fact, my hand made everything here on earth. So you have built this little thing and you think I live there. You built this. How big is God that the temple would contain him? And that was the same thing that Solomon said when he was dedicating the temple. The temple that the disciples were even glad and thrilled over was a temple that could not compare to the temple that Solomon built. And it was that one that Solomon built that God was here referring to. Is this the house you built for me? Have you not heard? Don't you know I am God? Even this temple that is like a contraption. It can't even contain my finger. No wonder he told Solomon, I'll put my name there. Not that I'm living there, but I'll just put my name there. It belongs to me. I own it. Yes, you have built it for me. I accept it. I put my name there, but it cannot even contain my finger. And Solomon himself acknowledged when he was dedicating the temple that God cannot live in the temple. 1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 27.
But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded?
That was Solomon. He knew, he was convinced that the house was too small to contain God. He knew that the house was just a contraption as far as God is concerned. But it was just in honor of his name. I am building this temple. I love God so much that I want to build him a house and dedicate it to him. I know he wouldn't live there. I know he can't live there. I know it is too small, but I just want something to remind me all the time of God. Something to always remind me of his presence. And so he built that temple and he dedicated it. And so when people began to worship the temple, God began to ask them, look, you're missing it. It's not the outwardness or the outward beauty or the opulence or the wealth spent on it that matters. I am God, not the building. And God corrected them. He said, look, there is a man. He said, unto this man, that's Isaiah 66. Unto this man will I look. Now, if you really understand that book of Isaiah 66, you find out that God was actually talking about his resting place. He said, where is the place of my rest? Where is my house? My resting place? God rests in Jesus. In Colossians chapter 1, I think in verse 19, the Bible tells us how it is that God dwells fully, manifestly inside the person of Jesus. Which agrees with what Isaiah here wrote. Not in a place built with man's hands. God cannot dwell in a place that man has built. God is not looking at the physical temple. He's not dwelling in the physical temple, so to speak. He dwells in this man. The man that trembleth at his word. The man, Jesus Christ. Colossians chapter 1, quickly. Colossians, the book of Colossians chapter 1 and verse number 19.
For it pleased the Father that in him should all fullness dwell.
All the fullness of God that the temple could not contain. All the fullness of God that the building could not contain. All fullness dwells in this man, Jesus Christ. Again, Colossians chapter 2. And we read verse 9.
He says, for in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily.
This is not spiritually now. bodily. For in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead, bodily, physically. God is not dwelling in Jesus by faith. No. God dwells in the temples by faith. God dwells in our churches by faith. By the faith of the believers who are gathered there. That's why Jesus said, where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there. It could be under a tree. It could be in a boat. It could be in the graveyard. But where two or more are gathered in my name, he says, I am there in their midst. In other words, the house is built by the faith of the people who are gathered there. God dwells in such a house by the faith of the people. But God dwells in Jesus Christ bodily, physically. If there is any word that can be applied to God as physically. But the disciples were thrilled at this physical thing. Just as today we beat our chest, my church is better than your church. My church is bigger than your church. My church is more equipped than your church. We forget the fact that the building is not the church. The Holy Spirit, through Paul, will tell us that we, the gathering of the saints, that is the church. Peter would say, you are living stones that are building up a spiritual house. The mentality of the church today is just about the same as the mentality of the Judaists at the time of Jesus, when everybody revered the temple, when everybody reverenced the temple, when everybody looked up to the temple, when everybody worshipped the temple, even as ministers of God, many worship the temple, the church, not God himself. You see, in the Old Testament, the Old Testament priests took delight in the offerings brought, in the sacrifices made. They took delight in the service of the temple, but not delight in the God of the temple. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. The sacrifices were made outside the temple. It's still the outside thing. The brazen altar was outside the temple at the outer court. The laver was at the outer court. You dress yourself, you look so good, you follow rules and regulation, you follow what we call today the ethics of service. Excuse me, excuse me, a lot of things are wrong. I'm sorry to say this. We're still discussing Matthew 24 and verse 1. Brothers and sisters, are you thrilled at the physical church or temple that you worship in? Just like that temple, many magnificent buildings today called churches. God is not in them. He said, behold, I leave your house unto you desolate. It's just like the wise man will say, a congregation of the dead. They come together, they meet. They have their rituals of meeting. They have their excitement, but God is not there. The beauty of the building does not determine the presence of God. Even in Joel, God himself will warn. He said, listen, rend your hearts, not your garment. In other words, I am more interested in the inner man than the outer man. That's why Paul would say, though our outer man is perishing and decaying and dying daily, yet our inner man is refreshed daily. God is more interested in the inner man. than the beauty of the outside. The Holy Spirit speaking through Paul will tell us it's not the outer man. He says they have the form, the outward nature, the outer thing, yet they deny the power thereof. The power is the one inside. We'll continue with this as we enter verse 2. Shalom and God bless you.